This is one of the stories from the short stories of Lake Walloon, March 8th, 2022, a fish story. It was a fish story about bones, a story about a young boy who caught the biggest marlin ever. Dennis Murphy was a college professor of American English literature at Hobart College in Geneva, New York. Beyond being a college professor, he was one of the world's biggest Ernest Hemingway freaks. Rather, he was crazy discovering new angles and stories related to Ernest Hemingway. In that search from the John F. Kennedy Museum Hemingway archives to everywhere in the continental United States, he sought the places and spaces Hemingway traveled. In all those stops, in all those files and letters, he found one lone interesting story of a fish, and he was going to see if it was true. Through the United States State Department Cultural Office, he arranged for a research visa to visit Cuba and Hemingway's home and village. Dennis had a lunch date with Gregorio Fuentes, Hemingway's fishing buddy and first mate. Gregorio was still alive, still smoking his cigars at 101 years old. He waited patiently at the Miami Airport terminal for the boarding call.
Flight 721 to Havana, Cuba, now boarding at Gate 11, Gate A11.
721? That's Hemingway's birthday. Someone was fooling with him, he chuckled. Eagerness crept into his body and his mind began to race. Dennis was going to the Finca and to lunch with Gregorio. It was a feeling that overwhelmed the man so much the flight attendant asked if he was okay as he entered the cabin. He had splurged and bought a round-trip first-class seat for the 40-minute flight. In a little more than an hour, he'd be standing on Hemingway's Island. He'd walk the streets of Havana and the yard at the Finca. His mind drifted as the jet lurched down the runway. 2 hours later, he was checking into the same hotel that Hemingway had stayed in, where he had written and fell asleep. He felt chills when the desk attendant handed him his keys. Dennis was staying in the room next to the suite Papa had occupied. It was time for a drink after he called the consulate to confirm the lunch with Gregorio tomorrow. Dennis unpacked his ditty bag. He traveled light. 3 T-shirts, 6 pairs of skivvies, 5 pairs of socks, and 2 pairs of cargo shorts, and a few golf shirts. He had one special shirt for a dinner planned later this week, he hoped. Dennis opened his travel bath kit. He opened the tap, and out came the brown-tinged water. What the hell, he thought? Dennis reached over to the little nightstand and grabbed a bottle of water. He poured it on the washcloth and wiped the day's travel from his brow, cheeks, and neck. Better get used to sweating as the thought crossed his mind. He would stroll a little, eat some good, authentic Cuban food. Murphy would find the bar or two Ernest had frequented and slam on a good buzz tonight. You only live once, he said to himself, at least once in this lifetime. He grabbed his straw hat, sunglasses, and wallet, leaving his cell phone in the room. Dennis was not expecting any calls in Cuba. He secured the room door and headed for the stairs. Let's see. The first stop would be El Floridito. That seemed like a good walk to have a drink with Papa and the people Hemingway adored. As he walked down the hotel steps, he stood frozen in time, glancing at the commotion and the Cuban people doing their daily routines. Is this what Papa witnessed on his first steps? Dennis smelled the fresh sea air carried in on the breeze off the bay before the city. He smelled the exhaust of the old American cars that were the cabs of Havana. And then he took in a moment to breathe in the intoxicating aroma of the street vendors' varied food being cooked and warmed on the open grills and flames in the square. He had dreamed of knowing what Ernest Hemingway had experienced on his first steps in the city of culture, life, and lore. Dennis was standing in the footsteps of his literary idol. He turned to his left and began his stroll. There were hundreds of pigeons and little swallows or some bird. There before him was the dream of feeling what Papa's senses must have engaged as he tried to absorb every nuance and emotion. In the few short blocks to the bar, Murphy, that was Dennis's nickname, experienced an emotional transformational energy, goosebumps and a keen sense of sensory overload. It was nearly making him breathless. Dennis entered the bar and stopped for a moment to let his hazel eyes adjust to the dark bar. It was a little after 1 p.m. He reached in his right pocket and took out a fresh, pressed white hanky. His eyes were teary from the change in the light and from the emotions. And then he saw the big, hulking grin of Hemingway, and it wasn't a dream. El Floridito had a life-size statue of Ernest Hemingway in the exact place that Papa had drank his frozen daiquiris, and there was no one standing with Papa. Murphy slid into the spot next to the statue and told the bartender, "I'll have what he's drinking." The old man in the red jacket behind the bar started the routine that made what Hemingway called the best damn daiquiri on the planet. He was absorbing the moment, every nuance in the room, the people, the smells, and then the barkeep slid over the elixir of the man Murphy idolized. And now the taste, he thought. Damn, that was cold. The freshness of the ice and the alcohol brought forth memories. Memories of his grandmother buying him his favorite ice cream cone at Gannon's in the valley where he grew up. Murphy licked the rim of the glass as a young boy would an ice cream cone. He looked to his left and winked at Papa. "I'm going to find out the real story about the fish," he whispered to Papa. "One true and genuine sentence, huh?" Dennis said. Gregorio would know the truth, and tomorrow he would see if Gregorio would tell him the same story. In the notes, it said the Fuentes told Papa the story one day as they brought the Pilar back from a day of fishing in the stream. The old man had fished for 84 days in a small sailing skiff in the stream without taking a fish. That was the opening sentence of The Old Man of the Sea. But was it true and genuine? Was it an old man who caught the big fish, or was it a young boy? That was the conflict in Murphy's brain. He had read in a letter that the real story was about a young boy around 12 who had made enough money fishing for the other fishermen that he bought a small sailing fishing skiff. The letter alleged that Gregorio had told Papa a story of the young boy who went out fishing one day and was gone for 4 days. The 75-year-old uncle who the boy lived with had stayed 3 days and 3 nights on the end of the jetty awaiting the boy, looking out to the sea for a glimpse of the top of the boy's mast. The old man had prayed to the gods of the sea and the sky for his nephew's return. He'd give his own life to know that the boy would return. He had no more fish to catch. He had trained the boy to fish. Carlos was retired, but when he fished, he was the king. Always the biggest and fattest fish to feed his family and friends. According to the story, on the 4th day, the mast did appear, its sail full on a slight beam reach. When the small boat slid up on the beach, the boy collapsed his body, draping over the tiller. The old man jumped in the boat and held the boy tight. His friend Juan handed him a jug of water, and he poured the water over the boy, drenching his tattered rags of clothing. He prayed again, and the boy opened his eyes. God was great, thought Carlos. God was good. Tied to the gunwales of the 16-foot boat was the largest fish anyone had ever caught. It was a full 2 feet longer than the boy's boat. Its bill and head glistened in the warm morning sunshine. The big marlin was at least 18 feet long, maybe longer, and there was nothing after the fish head but bones, stripped clean of the meat. The boy smiled at his uncle. I caught him, and I felt sad when he was finally at the boat. And then the sharks came, and I defended the great fish, and then I lost him to the devils." Murphy hoped the gods of the sea and the gods of the sky were in his favor tomorrow when he met Gregorio. Like the old man or the boy or Hemingway, Murphy was on his own fishing trip.